This podcast is made possible by listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nash Villager Podcast. It's October 16th, 2024. On this day in 1946, 10 men were hung in a prison gymnasium in Germany, executed for their crimes against humanity. They were Nazi leaders, architects of the Holocaust, convicted by an international military tribunal in the first of what are now known as the Nuremberg trials. There was no question that they were guilty. There was widespread agreement that they deserved to die. But some did question whether the execution was wise. A correspondent for the Daily Express wrote of concern that putting those men to death rather than letting them waste away in prison could help make them martyrs. As he put it, quote, "I fear that in the bomb-blasted gymnasium of the Nuremberg prison, a new legend of heroic militant Teutonism may have been born, with propaganda value." And that kind of worry is reflected in the way the bodies were handled after the execution. Rather than let them remain whole, to potentially be exhumed and treated as relics for adherents of hate-filled ideology, all 10 bodies were cremated, and the ashes were scattered over a nearby river. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. Execution is never simple. There's the most basic question of whether or not state-sanctioned killing is ethical. But beyond that, there are a whole slew of complications. For one thing, it's pretty rare to have such a cut-and-dry case of guilt as there was in the Nuremberg trials. As much as we try to safeguard the judicial process, sometimes the person who is convicted for a heinous crime is not actually the person who did that horrible thing. And then there is the matter of how the execution is carried out. The constitutional ban on cruel and unusual punishment extends to execution, because how we choose to carry out punishment, even the ultimate punishment, reflects as much on us as a society as it does on the nature of the crime at hand or the person identified as the criminal. That issue of how we carry out executions humanely, if you will, is why there haven't been any in Tennessee since 2022. But that could change soon. 2 years ago, Governor Bill Lee put the execution schedule on pause over concerns with the state's protocol for making sure lethal injection drugs work as they should. At a recent State House hearing, the Corrections Commissioner indicated new protocols should be ready to go in early January, and that potentially means executions will start back up around that time. He did not say what those protocols would be, so we don't know if it's a reworking of the way the drugs are tested or a reworking of what drugs are used. And that's an important point because the very makeup of the three-drug cocktail has come into question in recent years. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. For the first century or so of Tennessee's existence as a state, capital punishment took the form of hangings in the same county where the person was convicted of the crime. And for what it's worth, several convictions qualified for the death penalty. It wasn't just for murder. In 1913, the state took over the job of carrying out executions, and the method changed to the electric chair. In that era, there was a real ebb and flow to how often they happened. In the 1930s, the state carried out nearly 50 capital punishments. After that, things slowed down a lot. In 1960, a man convicted of rape was put to death, and for the next dozen years, there were none. And then, in 1972, the U.S. Supreme Court declared capital punishment unconstitutional. It found that states carried out those penalties in a way that was arbitrary and discriminatory. 4 years later, another ruling reopened the door, but with a new emphasis on making sure that execution truly was not cruel or misused. In reaction, Tennessee legislators reworked the state's death penalty law. The version they adopted in 1978 is basically still what's in place today. The electric chair was still used, but there was a real question of whether or not that was the best way to do things in order to avoid cruelty. A couple of lawsuits that went all the way up to the state Supreme Court led to a judicial review of the system as a whole. And as a result of that process, in 1998, the law was adjusted to make lethal injection the way the state opts to kill people convicted of capital crimes. The argument for lethal injection is that it is clinical and supposedly painless. That's a theory anyway. Whether that's actually how things really go has come under pretty intense scrutiny recently. Some autopsies suggest that the 3-drug cocktail Tennessee has used for most of the lethal injection era does not work as advertised. Those findings suggest people are actually still conscious and in great discomfort, but unable to display what they feel. And then there are the cases where the drugs clearly did not work as expected, like the 2014 execution in Arizona, where it took nearly 2 hours for the man to die. Those problems are why there's a question of whether the 3-drug cocktail will be revised or replaced in some way in the state's new execution protocol. But the reason the governor put executions on pause in the first place was a different one. He stopped them because it became clear the existing rules were not being followed. The state is supposed to test the drugs to make sure they're the proper strength, haven't expired, are still sterile, that kind of thing. In other words, to ensure that at the very least, assuming the 3-drug method works as it should, that's what's being injected, that it really qualifies as the intended dosage of those 3 drugs. So the new protocol could be more focused on making sure those tests happen as they should. What we do know is that the Attorney General's office has been consulted heavily in an attempt to make this new set of rules as legally airtight as possible. Okay, that's enough about death. Good thing we've reached the middle of the week, because that means it's almost time for the latest edition of What Wear Wednesday. That's coming up after the newscast.
Here's the mantra I think about at WPLN. We connect the dots. It captures a mindset that our journalism is not merely about the latest press release or proclamations by officials. Instead, we can develop expertise, dig deeper, and look to history to understand what's happening now. I'm Tony Gonzalez, news director. When I'm planning coverage and editing stories, the best part is being part of a team that's curious about our community and invested in its future.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Old Tent City in Nashville will soon be a thing of the past. The homeless encampment under the Silliman-Evans Bridge has existed for about 40 years and has been targeted by various efforts to clear it. Now the city has finalized plans to begin removing the structures that have been deemed hazardous. The decision was announced yesterday by the Metro Office of Homeless Services. It comes after weeks of delay since the city first began distributing official notices to the residents in early September. The plan caused a backlash by residents and advocates for the unhoused, and officials paused to organize a task force and assess how to safely dismantle the encampment. The city will continue to hold monthly fairs to provide resources and services for those who are displaced. U.S. Congressman Mark Green from Tennessee is on the ballot this November after initially announcing his retirement earlier this year. Green says he was encouraged by other Republicans not to hang up his hat just yet. For the wide swath of counties he represents, it's very likely Green will hold on to his seat. But his Democratic opponent has one of the most well-funded campaigns of any member of her party in this state. WPLN's Mariana Bacallao has more.
One thing that's top of mind for both candidates this election:
fentanyl has flooded into the country. It's killed hundreds of thousands of people.
That's Mark Green in conversation with the editor-in-chief of Clarksville Now, his hometown newspaper. Green says immigration and the situation at the U.S.-Mexico border needs to change.
We need to do merit-based immigration. We do. It's best for our country.
But Green's opponent, former Nashville Mayor Megan Barry, wants to address the dangers of fentanyl from a public health perspective.
Things like the Modernizing Opioid Treatment Access Act, things like the Mental Health Justice Act, Saving America's Rural Hospitals, all of these things that could help constituents in Tennessee have a better life.
Barry says her approach to treatment is influenced by her own family tragedy.
We lost our only son, Max, to an overdose, a knock in the middle of the night that no parent wants to answer. Unfortunately, Max's story is not unique. The overdose crisis continues to ravage families in every community.
Barry's campaign also focuses on abortion access. Tennessee's abortion ban does not make exceptions for rape, incest, or the life of the mother.
If we leave it up to our state legislature and we don't have the ability to do a referendum like a lot of states do, so the only way Tennessee women are going to have the protection they deserve for their bodies is if we pass something at the national level.
The incumbent has a track record of opposing abortion, but did not respond to WPLN's request for an interview or for comment on the issue. The 7th District is expected to lean Republican, but the fundraising gap between the candidates is the smallest compared to the state's other contests. Mariana Baca-Yao, WPLN News.
Medicare open enrollment started yesterday. That's the federal program that offers health insurance to seniors 65 and older. It covers about 1.4 million Tennesseans. From now until December 7th, Tennesseans who are 65 or older get to pick their coverage for 2025. WPLN's health reporter Catherine Sweeney tells us more.
If you're a senior eligible for Medicare, buckle up. The program is a bit complicated and you'll have some choices to make. You can get Original Medicare, the traditional program that has existed for decades, or Medicare Advantage. That's through a private health insurance company like Blue Cross Blue Shield or Humana. Here in Tennessee, about half of people choose traditional Medicare, which usually has more out-of-pocket costs. But you can see any doctor who takes Medicare without limits, and you're less likely to have to get permission from your insurer before getting treated. You're also less likely to have your care denied. The other half enrolls in Medicare Advantage plans. Those plans tend to be cheaper out of pocket, and they typically cover prescriptions, and they usually offer broader coverage, like some vision and dental benefits. But they require you to go to in-network providers, and you often need to get their sign-off before treatment. Catherine Sweeney, WPLN News.
If you want help sorting through all of this, the federal government pays for a service called State Health Insurance Assistance Programs, or SHIP. It's unbiased, meaning it does not promote any specific insurance type, and it's confidential. You can go to tnmedicarehelp.com or search Tennessee SHIP for more information. Some sewage systems in Tennessee's rural areas are not performing well. News Channel 5 reports that the state doesn't have basic design standards for how these systems are built. About half of the state's more than 300 rural sewage facilities end up breaking other state rules, and 1/4 of them have violations. Tennessee's environmental agency has found some serious violations over the years. In Fentress County, agency inspectors found a lagoon filled with sewage from a neighborhood. In rural areas, developers will often build their own mini sewage treatment facilities for new neighborhoods. In 2019, Tennessee's environmental agency tried to pass minimum design standards for these types of systems, but the state legislature subsequently introduced a developer-backed bill to block such an action. Environmental groups are now asking the state to reconsider. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. It's time for our Hump Day check-in from WNXP about the events that are coming up soon, including a milestone for one unique Nashville venue.
I'm Marquise Munson here with another edition of Nashville Public Radio's What We're Wednesday, keeping you up to date with the happenings in Nashville this week. Starting with tonight, Sabrina Carpenter is at Bridgestone Arena, and the Sacred Souls perform their latest album, Got a Story to Tell, at the Ryman.
Get up now. Place your feet on solid ground. Get up now. Friends come and go, who's got you now?
WNXP Trivia returns to the Blue Room tomorrow night, and on Friday afternoon, former WNXP Nashville Artist of the Month, Joy Aladakun, gives an in-store performance at Grimey's in celebration of her new album, Observations from a Crowded Room.
Lately I've been dreaming of a house out in the woods with a big backyard, my dog and my lover.
Speaking of former WNXP Nashville Artist of the Month, Rainbow Kitten Surprise performs at Ascend, wrapping up the week Monday with 2 WNXP Present shows between Cursive at the Basement East and Porches at Exit Inn. For more events, head over to WNXP.org/events.
Sometimes it seems like the world's spinning just for me. Still not convinced that it isn't. In my universe, you could do much worse. Delusionality is living the dream.
This week for What We're Wednesdays, we discuss Dark Matter Fest happening on Saturday and Sunday. Katie Kirby, one of the event's performers, joined us to talk about how important the DIY venue was for her musical journey.
I didn't go to shows or like all ages spaces when I was younger in middle school and high school. So like in college and fresh out of college, it was really beautiful to me to see like a space like that for the first time that's like properly a DIY space and like really run by just a handful of people who really, really care. So I did a lot of different things. It was like the third like space that Dark Matter had occupied, I think, at that point. And I really only worked there for like a few months before the pandemic hit. But it was also a place I went to see shows all the time. It was a place that I played shows at myself. So yeah, so for a few months there, I was on the schedule running door or running sound or bar, I think. It was sort of rotating duties or as needed, which is great. That's the only time I've ever run sound. I wasn't great at it, I'm sure, but yeah, really, really fun times.
Pancake is the way to my heart. And when I fall in love, I'm seeing stars.
One of my favorite shows at Dark Matter is, well, there's a lot. It's honestly like there's like too many to remember accurately, but I think one that I think about a lot is I was like running sound and this band called Joey Nebulous was coming through. Like now they're still out there. They're still a band. They live in Chicago and like we're friends. Love that dude. And so that's like a sweet little memory of a show. And the first show that I played at Dark Matter was in their second older location. And I opened for Emily Yasina. And that was like such a big deal to me. And I was so excited to be there. I think it was just like the first really, really cool show that I played or that I thought was cool.
I followed you in the traffic. I never thought about asking what we were going to do. When we got where we wanted to get to, I'm slipping into an accident.
I have been talking about it to my friends in New York because I think it is like it's something that makes me feel really hopeful and sort of like just the fact that they've been pulling it off for this long makes me feel like, I don't know, like trying to build something isn't a waste of time and like sometimes it does work out. It feels special to feel like a genuine sense of camaraderie with the people that are working at a venue. And that may sound weird because it's like, well, we're all like, because everyone's a professional and we're doing this for our jobs. But in sort of bigger, more corporatized venues, everyone's just doing their job and that's awesome. But I do think music is a communal thing. And I think it is really wonderful to feel like you're putting on a show together with the people, you know what I mean? And it's kind of that sort of like excitement of like kind of like school play vibes almost, where like everybody's working together and everyone is equally excited, more or less, that the show is happening. And it's exciting to everybody. And I think that's a really beautiful way and like a beautiful thing for like audience members to come into. And I think that's just a great way to experience a show.
For more information on Dark Matter Fest and other events happening this week, visit WNXP.org. My name is Marquise Munson, and thank you for listening to another edition of What Were Wednesdays.
One of these days I'll have to sit down and eat.
Thanks for listening to the Nashvillager podcast. We do this roundup of what's happening in Nashville every weekday. So subscribe in your favorite podcasting app to make sure you never miss an episode. And if you like this, you'll probably enjoy the Nashvillager newsletter too. You'll get perspective from more of my colleagues at Nashville Public Radio and links to the stories we're following. Sign up for those daily emails at WPLN.org/Nashvillager. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one. And we'll catch back up tomorrow.